Hey YouTube, how you going? Welcome to another video. Continuing on with this series of videos where we're updating some more backend logic so that I can continue to flesh out our knowledge management application. So in the previous video we added backend logic to support the editing of existing notes. Now what I want to do is add the backend logic to support the ability to edit existing sources. So I'll just put that there. It's not green because we haven't done it yet. So again, not to repeat myself, but I am just conscious that sometimes new people might be coming to these videos. Typically when you have a folder structure or a Node.js application, which is what we're using on the backend, Node.js, you'll have things like obviously middleware, utils, validation chains, reusable services, that kind of thing. And as a result, you can kind of end up with a project file and folder structure that looks a little bit like this. What I've found working with AI is that the flatter we can make the structure, the better it is to work with AI. It just compartmentalizes things. So when we look over at my code, for example, and the most recent one we did was this edit note controller, route, services, utils, and validation chains. So you can see that all of that functionality is just within this one folder, and then that way if there's ever any issues I can ask AI just to look at these files and understands it. Equally, when you look at things like the service, it calls each of these individual utils or helper functions, and then each of these kind of functions in and of themselves are very specific. So validating note access, handle source update, handle folder update, etc. So what we're doing in this video is we're now working, as I said, on the backend logic for editing sources, and I've duplicated my kind of standard prompt and updated the user story, so we want to be able to edit an existing source. Now what's a little bit different about sources is that if you look at the source model, you'll see that the data, it's a dynamic field basically based on the source type and the fields that are created for that particular source type. So the name and label and type, string, boolean, date, etc. can always be different when creating a source type. If you don't know what I mean between like source types and that kind of thing, so when you're creating a note in the application, you might have learned something from a book. A book is a source type, whereas if you learn something from a YouTube video, then a YouTube video is a source type. And then obviously if you want to kind of log those notes and share what you learned from each thing, you want to have different fields based on that, right? Like the channel name, the channel URL, or the video URL, it's going to be different than if it's a book. So anyway, that's a bit of explanation there. So then in the data object and model, I'm just saying, look, in your project knowledge, you have access to all of these files and models. So I started with our note model, which references our user model, extended company model, which in turn references company model, our tag model, our folder model, and most importantly for this case, our source model. So then in terms of code preferences, I'm telling it specifically what we want to do is create a patch request rather than a put request, so then we can just update individual fields and don't have to pass the whole thing in each time. And the API endpoint we want to hit is this here, API/v1/source/edit source with the source ID. So then because we want this compartmentalized approach, within this subfolder we want these individual files, so edit source.routes.controls.services.utils, and if required .validation chains, and then just kind of specifying a little bit more detail what I want it to do. I think the most important things are we must ensure that the source being edited belongs to the company and that the user is associated with that company. And then we also want to allow we must then allow the user to edit any of the data in the fields associated with that source. Remember, these fields are dynamically generated, so that's pretty important. And then also this part here, each of these utils and any others you need should do one specific thing. Right, so with that, what we can do is we can come back to our project here, and we're going to cut and paste this in. We don't need to paste it all in because it does have the details above, and we will do that. While Claude is running that, what we're going to do is we are just going to come over here and commit this code because we hadn't done that at the back end of the last video. So git add, git commit -m, created edit note, backend functionality, and do that. And then while it's coming up with some questions, I've got to go turn off my air conditioning and I'll be back. Alright, so as usual, Claude has some questions for us. Okay, it's weird how it always asks different questions, and I think some of these things are things that I could probably build into the prompt. Maybe what we might do is just add like a little thing down here, prompt updates, tell auth would be one. So yeah, I mean, yes. Where to just make this one. When updating source fields, should we validate? Yes. Validate fields. No, you That's an interesting question, right? Like preventing updates to certain fields. So maybe in the future you do want to define a field that can't be edited in the future, but for now, like I think that's overthinking things. No. Yes, return the updated source. The source model has a data field that's a mapper field. No. Finally, only merge the new. Oh, hang on. For your last technical question, so it's saying here the source model has a data field that's a map of field names to values. When updating, should we completely replace the existing data map with the new values? So we don't want it to replace the field names and labels. It should only change the values against those field names. So when a user updates a source, they should only be updating the values against the existing field names. They are not updating the names of the fields against the source type. This will... Okay, so let's start that. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, so one of those in a video I probably published 3 or 4 before this one, when I was talking about some of the things that I've learned along the way, and I was talking a little bit how being someone who knows how to code, even a little bit, like I can be helpful, because if you weren't able to interpret this question, I mean, you can kind of go down a rabbit hole or do the wrong thing, create an application that maybe doesn't do quite what you want it to do. So that was a good example of that there. So what we're going to do is we're going to come and create these files, obviously. So what we want to do is go into sources. So again, we keep everything compartmentalized, sources and then individual folders within this. And this is edit sources. Oh, sorry, edit source, because we only edit one source at a time. And then within here we have edit source.routes.js. And this is fairly self-explanatory. What I like to do is I will just cut and paste the code in for now, and then afterwards I will run through the logic and explain, at least in layman's terms, how it all comes together. I don't necessarily go into a huge amount of detail. I do typically understand most of the code, sometimes though I don't. But I'm a bit more comfortable on backend working with Node.js than I am perhaps with front end and using React and some of the different packages and stuff like that. So if you've watched any of my front end videos, you know, for example, I am using TanStack query on the front end, but it's not necessarily my strong suit. It isn't something that I had a huge amount of experience with. Previously, I was using React Redux a lot of the time when I was building my own projects, and it's a little bit old hat, and in some cases a little bit overkill for what we want to do with projects. So yeah, using TanStack query on the front end, but that's for another day. So then in our index for the routes, we need to import edit source. Whoops. And then we need to add this source. Let's try and keep this a little bit compartmentalized. Interesting, it's put that part of the URL API endpoint there. What we're going to do is we're going to cut that, and we are going to paste that here. Yeah. All right, so let's run through this a little bit. So yeah, if I, hopefully it's big enough. Yeah. So we call our API endpoint, we pass in the source ID, it goes via our validation chains. This is interesting. This issue happened with the previous piece of code. It's like it can't, it's meant to automatically go there when I press F12. So let me just re-import it. I don't know why it's doing this, but when you redo it and then oh, hang on, I removed the wrong thing, sorry. Get rid of this, save, const. No, I've done it wrong again. Edit source, not type, just edit source. And then it goes when I re-import it with. Anyway, so we check that the ID exists. What's interesting though, if we look at this, is if we, for example, util no validation chains, bring up here, instead in this edit folder we say params mongo with message. So we really need this kind of error handling and call our validation error, but we will come back to that. So assuming it passes the validation chain, what we then do is we pass it onto our controller. So we go to edit source controller, get the source ID, and we get the data from the body. And then to update the source, we pass in the source ID, the data, and the user ID. So again, this is weird. It doesn't, maybe because I created the file after this file, I'm not really too sure. Const edit source, I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But look, if I re-import it and then go F12, it goes to it. So anyway, so yeah, we get our source ID, the data, and the user ID. So with the source, we find it by ID, we populate source type. If there's no source, we throw an error. We then get our user, we find a user by ID, we populate company, because we then need to get the company ID as well. Source.company ID. And then, well, we'll go into this, so it's going to be passing in user and then source.company ID, so that it can check the company ID off the user as well as the source to make sure they're the same. Validate source fields, update the source data, update source.save, and then return the update source. But most of the magic is going to happen in the utils. So we've got a couple here, 1, 2, and you can see them being imported here. So if we go into our, see again, it's doing the same thing. I wonder if I can save, just do that. F12, and yeah, it goes to it. Very weird. So here we validate the user access. So we're just checking the user, and user.company ID to string equals the source company ID. So ID on source matches the user ID for the company. Validate source fields. So checking that they're, make sure if there's no source type fields, we do that. We check each field in the data, field name, field value. So we get that from the object. So it's mapping them there. Validate field value, so we're validating the fields. So we've got a switch here, so we've got strings, numbers, booleans, and dates. So if we add different field type definitions later on, they need to match one of those as well, obviously. And that looks pretty good. So what we can now do is we can, again, high level explanation of the functionality there. We can kind of break it down in more detail if we need to, but for the purpose of this video, I don't think so. We're going to log in. And we're going to get our our bearer token, so that we can get all sources. So then if we replace this bearer token here and hit send, what we can do is we can now get an individual source. So it's going to be this ID, which is got these fields. So I've got so many things opened here. We need a patch request. What I might do is, what is that? Where was the sources one? Okay, all sources. We'll copy this, bring this here, paste this here, and then it was edit dash source / whatever the source ID is going to be. So for that, again, we're going to take this ID, copy, come here, paste that, not in that format. Do that. Headers, we need to get our bearer token. That one. Okay, so authorization, bearer, and then in our body, raw JSON object. Now, if we look at our code, what I'll do is here is an interesting source. Just passing in that existing source, we'll give Claude that source and say, hey, just give me one edited back, just so we can save a little bit of time of typing out all those fields ourselves and worrying about things. So just give me 2 seconds for Claude to respond. Alright, cool. So copy, put it here. So we got data object, and then these are the fields. So video title, channel name, video URL, publish date, description. If we go here, so how to listen to everyone was the current video title. It's got a video URL. What else has it changed? channel name. We hadn't previously given these fields to it beforehand. So you can see, yeah, it's added publish date, added description, added channel name. So they weren't previously included in the source, but we can add those. So if we hit send, route not found, that's going to be most likely a spelling mistake or a save issue. So let's just double check here. Source. This is sources. So spelling mistake. So get rid of that. Hit send. False. Source not found. Edit source. Let's just check here. Source. Hang on. Maybe I've got the wrong ID again. Because there's multiple IDs on that. I think last time, oh no. Which one is it? Source type. This is source. I think it's this one that we need. Try that again. Alright, custom app failed for value. Okay, so there's some error. Let's just ask Claude what this means. Compared to the other functionality that we did for like editing and existing note, there's a little bit more complexity here. So I don't think it's completely unexpected that we're going to have an error, especially because there's these different fields that can exist for every single source. So let's just see what Claude came back with. Key changes. So I see the error is occurring because we're trying to directly assign an object to the data field, but in source model data is defined as a map. Okay, so it was an error on ChatGPT, on Claude's part. So what we're going to do is we're just going to replace our edit source services file. Save that. So yeah, this is where it's doing it's mapping through the object. Okay, and if we come back here, let's just, we are running, and hit send. Source updated successfully. It's still got the right source type of YouTube video, so none of the source type data is being changed now, right? We're only changing the source itself, which is this fields array. Okay, it's made a mistake because it has interesting name and label. Okay, data, what? Okay, it's definitely it hasn't replaced the oh no, sorry, my mistake. Source type, and then here is the data. So it's got each of those fields. So it's returned the source type along with the source. So we don't actually need the source type returned for an individual source, but it's not really causing any harm, I guess. So how to be a better listener, the ultimate guide. So if we come back over here and refresh this, again we should see how to listen to everyone change to the new title. How to be a better listener, the ultimate guide. There we go. All right, so we've now got our functionality to edit an existing source. So if we come back over here, we can kind of mark this as green. We haven't obviously added on the front end, so I'll leave those for now. I'm going to pause here for a second, save this video, and then we might come back and work on the backend logic to delete existing notes and also delete existing sources. A little bit more complexity when we're deleting an existing source because we need to remove it from a note. But other than that, should be fairly straightforward. And we did that earlier today. Awesome. Catch you next one. Thanks for watching.